Hey everybody, Jim V here. Hey, it's time for my July-August snake oil column. And rather than read the whole column this time, I'm going to just kind of take some pieces out of it, give a general explanation. Because a little on the long side, you can catch the read over on my blog spot. I'll put that information in the comment section as well, too, to check out. So this is, again, brand new column for July and August, and it's called Dimming Your Light and the Importance of Being a Good Turtle Dad. And there's obviously a humorous point at the end of this. So, in a nutshell, last Mother's Day, I was kind of wasting time just flipping channels, purposely doing nothing. And my siblings were texting back and forth. I have a fairly large collection of siblings. And, I've gotten over the years where I don't even always participate with the texting and the going back and forth, and I'll get to that in a minute, even though I definitely didn't shut them out by any means. I wish everyone that was a mother a happy Mother's Day, but my mom and dad passed some years ago. And when I'm hanging, just trying to just waste time, and I'm flipping channels, and I start watching some old episodes of Everybody Loves Raymond, and I've seen every one of them. It was a great show, one of my top 5 shows, and my parents loved that show when it was on, even right before my father, right at the time my father died. That was his favorite show. And I remember my mom and dad would always be like, oh, we got to go home. We want to watch Raymond's on. So I'm flipping, watching a couple old episodes. And all of a sudden, I can just feel the room change. And I realize, I feel like my mom and dad are sitting in the room with me watching Everybody Loves Raymond. And it was just a really spiritual experience, and it made me kind of feel like, I just remembered when we were kids, we often would watch TV most evenings as a family. It was something that we bonded together with. So I just feel this very warm feeling of them kind of joining me in spirit and hanging out with me. And it was just wonderful. And I had a couple of hours of that before it kind of dissipated. And so, so I'm going to put a pin on that and leave that there and come back to that in a minute. So, when I was a kid, I always had weird kind of old soul stuff. I mean, I fed animals by hand, wild animals, squirrels and things like that. I saw ghosts. I sometimes used to sense my dead grandparents walking around in the house. I sometimes would talk to people and kind of see their past lives, bleeding through. I just, had a lot of very, what's probably normal to old souls, not normal to the average person. So that kind of was the spur that eventually got me kind of studying metaphysics and astrology, numerology, all those type of things as well too. Anyway, but I was careful of who I shared this with. And growing up in a family with 6 siblings, I developed 2 very important characteristics. One was I learned how to charm my mother and get a lot more than my siblings did because they were always yelling at her anyway. And I just was I figured out the angle to get my mom to, make me macaroni and cheese for lunch and be a little nicer to me. And I got a ton of flack from them. Oh, Jimmy gets away with murder and Jimmy gets everything. And why does Jimmy get this? And, stop yelling at her. That would be one suggestion. I developed, this charisma where I could influence people and natal to my astrology chart. The other thing I developed was a wicked sense of humor. And that was something that as a writer and a public speaker, I talk a lot of spiritual stuff. I like to share my comedy for obvious reasons. Anyway, so, and I got tons of flack about that. You shouldn't talk that way from my siblings. You shouldn't speak that way. And you think you're funny. And so, like any kid, and I'm sure a lot of my listeners here are going to resonate with this, you want support from your family. My parents weren't bad by any means, but like most of my siblings, I did not get a lot of support. It was bordering on sometimes outright nasty. Now, I have 6 of them, and 2 of my sisters are actually pretty cool. 2 of the other ones, middle ground, and my brother's horrible. So I had some self-esteem issues growing up, but I still developed these characteristics that were very, very necessary for my own, survival. So over the years, I sometimes struggled with the fact that even into adulthood, I never got a lot of recognition for the things that I did. I was always patting my siblings on the back when the kids graduated, high school or college, or they had kids, or they had anniversaries, or they got married. And it's always not sending presents but complimenting. And I did a lot of this, but all the things I did, I barely ever got any acknowledgement for. I did years of television work and never was asked to see a show or anything about it. Years of doing radio and them showing no interest or ever asking me about any of it, and publishing 3 books and never getting any acknowledgement for it or interest in it. and years of writing a column. There's so many things that I did that were more my creative style, and I got that they kind of didn't understand, but it almost seemed like they were going out of their way to not pat me in the back. It kind of harkened back to my childhood thing about don't be careful, don't give Jimmy a bigger head than he already has. So again, after over years of this kind of neglect, I just reached a point where it was like, you know what? I'm not going to leave my family behind and cut them off or anything like that. If we have family reunions, I show up once in a while, and I call some of them here and there. And I'm still pretty close to the two cool sisters. But ultimately, I just cut the amount of time and energy with them by about, 2/3. And so, because I just constantly kept dimming my light when I'm around it. And I have friends and clients and people that love my humor and love my wisdom and it give me a lot of accolades. And it's not like I need it, but we're human, right? So my friends love my humor and they laugh and I send them funny texts and they share the texts. And my family, God, it's like crickets when I say anything funny or amusing. It's always like a little bit of disdain or irritation. So I realized they're different people. They have different focuses, different soul ages, things like that. And even when I struggled with it over the years, I had some health issues, diverticulitis and stones that I worked through holistically, by the way, and cured. No credit for that either, of course. And none of them really, other than the two sisters, read my writing or anything about that. So I had to work through that stuff, and I healed. But again, that was part of feeling like I was being judged or not acknowledged, because there's always an energetic issue behind illness. Okay, so let's get back to the pin that I talked about. So here's this amazing experience. I'm feeling like mom and dad are with me. I feel energetic. I feel that love. I feel that support. And I think to myself, you know what? My siblings are probably still texting on a thread on Mother's Day. Let me see what they're talking about. Maybe I'll try to explain to them what's going on here. So when I tune in to their conversation that they're having, I have my oldest brother is a very, very insecure, egocentric, even at times mean person. And, anytime someone gets any type of success or accolades, he's got to prove that he's better somehow. So the siblings are somewhat talking about being mothers and things like that. And my brother kind of brings up that, well, he's a turtle dad. And so my siblings are going back and forth. Oh yeah, it's great being a turtle dad, and they're trying to shore up his weirdness. And I just see this and I'm just laughing. Here I am, I want to share this deeply spiritual event and situation, and they're talking about being a good turtle dad, right? And I love animals, and part of the reason my brother only has a turtle anyway is because dogs and cats run from him because he's terrifying and difficult. But it was almost like a dual thing. At one level, I'm laughing, and it's like, Jim, haven't you learned? Don't waste your time with this. It doesn't matter. And it was also sort of strangely endearing. I do love my family. They are kind of, a little special, not always in the best way, but it's just a different focus and perception. And that laughter, that humor, kind of was like the icing on the cake to clear the hurt. And that is one of the reasons that I do use humor, and I encourage clients to, in a healthy way, use humor as part of healing. There's many formulas for it. And this kind of did it for me, and I was still left with that wonderful experience of connecting with my mom and dad that day. And it was awesome. And I get visits and dreams and messages from my mom and dad, and they're alive and well. And it's awesome, man. I've embraced my old soulness, and that's what I work on a lot with clients, helping them to embrace their mature old soulness, because that's how you're supposed to be. All right, till next time, cheers.